Whether you care about healthcare, the environment, clean energy, or any other issue, there is one problem that influences our lawmakers way more than you and I, and that's money in politics. California's primaries for the midterm elections are scheduled for June 5th, and money is pouring into California's Senate elections. But does money really have an influence on our lawmakers? Lawmakers reward corporate donors in many different ways, like deregulating their industry, privatizing public services, giving them government contracts, allowing monopolies through corporate mega mergers, suppressing wages, and giving them huge tax cuts. Between 2007 and 2012, 200 of America's most politically active corporations spent $5.8 billion on federal lobbying and campaign contributions. In return, they received $4.4 trillion in federal business and support. To put it simply, for every $1 they donated, they got $760 back. Now that's a good return on investment. Thanks to the Republican tax plan passed in November, they'll receive even more. The bill cuts $6 trillion in taxes over a decade, with 80% of the benefits going to the top 1%. Our lawmakers constantly claim that tax cuts allow corporations to hire more workers and invest in company growth. Except that's not how the economy works. In 2016, Fortune 500 companies made a combined $890 billion. If they thought investing more money into their business would increase their profits, they would have done it already. Even Bloomberg reported that companies like Pfizer, Cisco, and Coke plan on turning over most gains from the tax cuts over to their shareholders. 13 days after the Republican tax plan passed the House of Representatives, Charles and Elizabeth Koch donated nearly $500,000 to Paul Ryan's joint fundraising committee. They know the best way to increase their profits is to invest in our lawmakers. And now the GOP is pushing for tax cuts phase 2. Americans for Prosperity's Federal Affairs Director, Mary Kate Hopkins, stated that, "I think this is a good opportunity to build on that success and build on that popularity." Americans for Prosperity is funded by Charles and David Koch. What a coincidence! According to the Federal Reserve, the bottom 90% of Americans shared 33.2% of total U.S. wealth in 1989. In 2013, that dropped to 24.7%. The top 1% controlled 29.9% of total wealth in 1989, and in 2013, that jumped up to 36.3%. The top 0.1% saw their wealth jump from 11.5% to 22%. They redistributed the wealth to the top, and then tell you they just can't afford to raise wages, even though CEO compensation has raised from 20 times higher than typical workers in 1965 to nearly 300 times in 2013. Our lawmakers rig the economy in favor of the rich, and then tell you that you're poor because you're just lazy takers.
I think not having the estate tax recognizes the people that are investing as opposed to those that are just spending every darn penny they have, whether it's on booze, women, or movies.
Just like Jesus said, the poor will always be with us. There is a group of people that just don't want health care and aren't going to take care of themselves.
I have a rough time wanting to spend billions and billions and trillions of dollars to help people who won't help themselves.
Well, maybe rather than getting that new iPhone that they just love and they want to go spend hundreds of dollars on that, maybe they should invest in their own health care.
They call us entitled when we beg for our tax dollars to go to things like healthcare or education, instead of subsidizing the richest companies in the world, on top of them paying little to no taxes. Some lawmakers may not even be consciously helping their donors because of financial contributions, but remember, most of Congress spends nearly 4 hours a day fundraising, and they're not calling you and me. They're calling people who've never worried about their family's healthcare costs. Not to mention the influence of lobbyists. Here's what Justice Democrat and Hawaii Congressman Kanyela Ng said about the influence of lobbyists in Washington.
When I got in, I noticed that everyone was sort of like had their hands tied, and you'd be taking a vote in the legislature and you'd keep receiving texts from lobbyists. There'll be lobbyists walking upstairs and like literally pointing at you while you're voting and texting you something like, "I'm going to remember this next year." But because of the way I won, I just ignored it.
Wow. Do you have any lobbyists? Money in politics is killing our democracy, as special interests prop up one candidate in each party and tell you to pick one. It's time we stop voting for candidates that take this dirty money. In California's Senate race, Dianne Feinstein raised $1 million in the last quarter of 2017. Her opponents, Kevin De Leon, raised $400,000 in big donor contributions, and Alison Hartson raised $0 in big donor money. But Hartson outraised both of them combined in small dollar contributions, each under $200. Alison Hartson was a teacher in Orange County for over a decade before becoming the national director of Wolfpack, an organization trying to remove big money in politics by a constitutional amendment through a convention of the states, instead of going through the collective conflict of interest that we call Congress. She led thousands of volunteers to pass conventions in 5 states, including California. She won't let outside influences stop her from serving all of her constituents. In 2016, South Dakota citizens voted in favor of a ballot measure that created an independent ethics commission, limited lobbyist gifts to lawmakers, and banned lawmakers from joining lobbying firms for 2 years after leaving office. South Dakota lawmakers repealed it. If you care about healthcare, criminal justice reform, clean energy, anything, just know that billionaires' wallets will have more of an influence on our lawmakers than you and I ever will. If any candidate takes money from super PACs, lobbyists, corporations, unions, any special interests, do not reward them with your vote. Now is not the time for half measures. I believe that Alison Hartson is California's best chance for getting big money out of politics and effectively fighting for policies that benefit all of us, like Medicare for all, clean energy, and fighting income inequality. And if you want to know what her opponents stand for, check their donor lists. I didn't even get paid to make this, but if someone fights for me, I'm definitely going to fight for them. Check out more of Alison's policies at AlisonHartson.com, and don't forget to vote in the primaries on June 5th, because if you wait until November, it might be too late to vote for someone who represents you.